Afternoon, let's make a start. My name is Mark Gracie. I run the Digital Compliance Hub, and this webinar, I'm probably going to talk for roughly around 30 to 40 minutes, and we're going to be covering compliance in an online world with a slight slant towards digital marketing and associated online services, but we'll be looking at data protection, privacy and security. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and you can see on your screen the slideshow, which has got a title slide at the moment, a big blue square with the title, the logo and my name and email address on it. In the control panel that you should be able to see from GoToWebinar, there's a questions section which you can use to ask any questions, and I'll try and pick up on those at the end of the session and answer as many of those as I possibly can. So, as I said, my name is Mark Gracie. I will mention Digital Compliance Hub and what that is a bit later on, but just to give you some background, I've worked in the internet industry since the mid-90s, and I spent, up until about 2014, about 15 years working in internet and telecoms regulation, both in terms of internal compliance with regulators and the law, as well as external stakeholder engagement and influencing. So trying to help the government understand how things on the internet work and make the right decisions when they come to developing bills and legislation which impacts on the way that we all use the internet and telecom systems. And an element of that work, certainly in the early days, so when the Data Protection Act came into being in the UK law, I was a data protection officer as well, so I had to take on responsibility for ensuring compliance with data protection rules, and I'm sure you can imagine working in a internet and telecoms environment, there's a heck of a lot of data to think and worry about. So that was an interesting challenge. So I'm a digital strategy consultant, and I look at the digital world in three pots, essentially, all overlapping conveniently in a Venn diagram, as you can hopefully see on screen now. We tend to think, when we talk about digital strategy, it tends to be around digital marketing and how you can get the best out of web and SEO and social media, and I call that digital performance. So that is using online services and how you can use those to grow your business. But actually, if you look at a bit wider than that, there's two other areas: compliance and security. So digital compliance is, in a marketing sense, there's certain rules that you should and shouldn't, things that you should and shouldn't be doing in a marketing environment. So how you use email for marketing, for example, or telephone systems or SMS marketing are governed by various rules and self-regulation. But the big one, of course, is the data protection, and it's big at the moment and a hot topic because of the General Data Protection Regulation, which will come into UK law next year. And so, as I'm sure you can imagine, there's quite a bit in this presentation about the GDPR. Otherwise, other than that, we will also be covering some of the other angles, so around privacy, which I put within the compliance bubble, and also on the security side. I see that as two main areas. What I call data security, which is how you secure the online systems and the kind of services that you're using, and also what's typically referred to as cyber security, which is protecting your business from cyber attacks, ransomware. We all heard about the WannaCry ransomware a few weeks back, and how that impacted some significant services, particularly the NHS. So in that area, whilst I don't do the technical stuff, so I don't patch firewalls or fix virus configurations or remove viruses from systems, I do look at how I can help businesses understand the risks and what they can do to mitigate those risks from a people perspective. In fact, that's where I come from across all three of these pots: people, policy and process. If you get your policies and you adhere to them in terms of your processes and your procedures right, and your people know what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be doing it, then you can really mitigate against a lot of risks, be they directed at you or in terms of things like data protection, fending off any investigation from the Information Commissioner, as an example, if somebody's complained about the way you're using their data. But anyway, if you look at those 3 pots and they all overlap in a Venn diagram, the bit in the middle and the hotspot is trust and reputation. If you get all 3 right, then that's good for your business. You can have the best looking website in the world, but if it gets hacked and replaced by illegal pharmaceuticals, you've got SEO issues from a marketing point of view, you've got risk of access to data perhaps, and as well as the ramifications that it might have on your business in terms of trying to fix and recover from those kind of problems. So so that's where I come from, and that's the foundation of today's webinar. As I say, roughly about 30-40 minutes, with a chance for some questions at the end. But hopefully by the end you should, if you've not already, got a good idea of what some of the challenges you might want to think about within your business or your clients, or maybe even within the way that you work with your online services, whether you need to worry about them, and hopefully some views and thoughts about how you might be able to take away what we've discussed, and how you might be able to tackle those challenges yourself. So I've sort of covered this already, my 3 little circles on my Venn diagram. When I talk about digital compliance challenges, for most businesses that's about data protection, privacy, data security, which I put down to the use of the internet, and cyber security, which is your typical prevention of a cyber attack. And they're all interlinked, as I've already mentioned. So let's move on to the first one, data protection. If you've been following what's happening with the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR as its acronym is often used, you'll know that there's actually quite a lot happening. We've got less than a year to go until the regulations come into effect. They do replace the Data Protection Act in the UK because they're a regulation rather than a directive from Europe, which means that it applies to all member states regardless of national laws, except where there are what's called derogations in the regulation, which allow member states to implement things in their own little way. And there's a few areas where that still needs to be sorted out, and it'll be interesting to see how the UK government might do that. If you're sat there wondering, well, why is this relevant because we're leaving Europe? So sorry to say that this is coming in next year. If we're lucky and the Prime Minister manages to get what she wants, won't be leaving Europe until 2019, so there's at least a year overlap. And then we've got issues around, well, what happens when we do leave? We'll still need to have an adequate piece of legislation in place to allow us to work as a country with data across Europe, and it's not going to happen overnight in terms of legislation. So there is this expectation that actually at the point of Brexit, what was law the day before will continue to be law until things get sorted out. For a lot of businesses, that's a challenge because they need to get themselves thinking about how the General Data Protection Regulation might impact them. And there's an additional challenge, which is that in some ways we're all feeling our way as to what how to interpret the law. The Information Commissioner is publishing guidance. The Article 29 Working Party, which is all of the regulators across Europe, get together, and they're also publishing guidance, and they've published some already around data protection officers, data portability, and a few other things. Plus also there's going to be a EU-wide data protection board, and who knows what might come out of that in terms of guidance or expectation with regards to compliance. So we've got this challenge where we need, as business owners, to deliver compliance by 25th of May next year, and we need to do a best we can based on the information that's provided. But over the next year we're going to see lots more information, lots more guidance. I'm sure we're going to have some challenges along the way, and then, as I say, as it beds in as a piece of regulation, we're going to have to think about how that any changes that might occur or interpretations that are European wide, how they might impact our businesses. And then we've got the challenge of Brexit as well, and what that might mean within the UK. And if you spotted yesterday, there was actually a data protection bill in the Queen's speech. There's not much information about what's going to be in the bill, but it's part of what was in the Tory manifesto around protecting young people's data online, as well as some processing stuff, mainly around law, police and security services access to data and how they manage that. But with other changes that are coming across Europe as well, which will also impact us, and we may see some other things around there, particularly, like I mentioned, there's some derogations which the GDPR has, which we may need to implement in UK law in a particular way, and maybe the data protection bill may be the vehicle for doing that. So we'll have to see. So lots to look out for and lots to think about. I've highlighted two particular areas, particularly from a marketing point of view, of things to think about, and a particular challenge all around the change to the consent mechanism. And then the bottom square there is about preparation. I'll just very quickly talk about some of the things you might want to think about in terms of getting yourself GDPR compliant, or at least starting to think about how that compliance might impact you or your clients. But those aren't the only things. As this fan demonstrates, there's a very brief summary there of 10 of the main changes that are happening, and they vary from the consent, which we're going to talk about in a minute, to a change in scope, a definition of personal data to include online identifiers, special conditions for the way that you handle data relating to children, and how you present information to children so that they can actually understand why you're asking for their data and what you're going to do with it. Actually, that you also require to have consent from a guardian if you're going to continue to process the data of a child being defined as 16 or under, although there is a derogation which allows the member state to define a child as younger, as long as it doesn't go any younger than 13. There's some new rights that have been introduced around data portability, which allows your data subjects to ask for copies of data in particular formats, or even enable them to transfer them from your system into another system. And there's some interesting guidance from the Article 29 Working Party on what that might look like. And the other addition is the right to be forgotten, which is if somebody says you don't need to have my data anymore, please remove it and delete it from your systems, then you have to comply. And then there's some other things around making sure that your services are compliant with privacy expectations and data protection. You're documenting your processes, and a lot of the documentation is around the accountability principles. You've not only got to be compliant, you've actually got to be able to demonstrate how you're compliant. And it also introduces data protection officers, DPOs, for certain types of business who need to have a specific role within an organisation, and some clarity around breaches. Certain regulated industries like telecoms and energy and financial services already have procedures they have to follow relating to declaring breaches of data, and the GDPR covers that for everybody. And then finally, of course, the thing that lots of people are shouting about and using as a stick to get people to start thinking about GDPR is the increase in fines. Under national law, so the Data Protection Act, the Information Commissioner can fine up to £500,000. I think has only ever fined 400k, which is what they did with TalkTalk, where they had that breach last year or the year before. Now it can be as much, depending on the type of problem, can be as much as 4% of global turnover or 20 million euros, whichever is the largest. So a significant change in the way data protection may be enforced. So moving along to the first challenge, consent. Basically, it says on the screen there how it's defined in the GDPR, but essentially you have to make sure you're absolutely clear what you're collecting the data for, and you need to get consent for the collection of that data. And in a marketing environment, that means you need to say you're collecting data for the purposes of marketing, and what you're going to do with that data, whether you're sharing it with anybody, who you are, and It needs to be completely unambiguous, so it needs to be clear, and you need to make sure it's not hidden away in any terms and conditions, anything like that. So it has to be upfront, and you need to provide information about how somebody can withdraw that consent if they wish to do so. But the key change in this particular area is the need for a positive opt-in. So it has to be an affirmative action by the data subject that they wish to opt in for the purposes of the processing of the data. So in a marketing scenario, that means if you have pre-tick boxes that say untick this box if you don't want to be marketed to, you won't be able to do that anymore. Nor can you write to everybody and say, we would like to market to you, let us know. We'll assume if you don't reply that you want to carry on being marketed to, and that isn't an affirmative action, therefore that won't be valid either. So it has to be a clear reason as to what you're, clear description of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and it needs to be opted in by the data subject in a positive affirmative action. You also can't say that you can't use this service unless you allow us to market to you, which is the consent without detriment. You need to be clear who you're sharing your data with, if indeed you share it with anybody. You need to make sure that the data subject understands how to withdraw their consent and that you actually pay attention when they do withdraw consent. And as part of the accountability aspects of GDPR, you also need to record the point at which you collected that consent and the mechanisms through which somebody consented. So some real changes for people working in marketing in the way that they're collecting data. Remember, this is relating to personal data. It gets slightly more complex when you think about business-to-business data because of the way that business-to-business marketing works, which is more controlled by the privacy regulations or PECR, Privacy and Electronic Communication Regulations in the UK. As I'll come to, that regime is changing as well, so there's quite a lot of uncertainty going forward in the next year or so. But for the purposes of what I'm talking about, we're talking about personal data. In a business-to-business environment, personal data does include sole traders and partners in a partnership, and also personalised email addresses within a business. So if you're Fred blogs at business.com, that's a personal email address and therefore would be considered personal data. So that's something you need to think about when it comes to marketing, because there's a different set of rules about that. And of course, if it is personal data, then there's a different set of rules now around consent. If you've been busy marketing already, you'll have a whole batch of data already. So the other thing you need to think about, another one of your challenges, is what do we do with our existing data? Now, in principle, and certainly the EU and the Information Commissioner have sort of said, well, if you're compliant with data protection law now, which you should be anyway, then you'll be not far off being compliant with GDPR compliant. However, if you don't have records of how you collected consent and that consent wasn't affirmative action, essentially you're going to have to carry out an audit of your data and consider what you want to do with it. This isn't a bad thing, because you might want to look at your data and see, well, actually, you might have a massive database, but if there's only a small proportion of that who engage with your offers or how you or the things that you're marketing to them, then you might use this as an opportunity to actually sort of hone down your data to a more efficient and effective set of data. But you need to think about, does your data meet the new rules under GDPR? Can you lawfully re-verify consent? Now, there was a fine against a couple of businesses. Honda was one of them, where they had a load of data which they then emailed the data subjects and said, we would like you to confirm consent. And they got fined for marketing, because the original intention of collecting that data wasn't for the purposes of marketing or being added to a marketing list. And the Information Commissioner felt that therefore they had breached the rules around marketing. So you need to be careful how you consider the remarketing, the aspect of how you seek consent if you're going down that route of having to seek out further consent, and you might end up having to send letters or postcards to people rather than using electronic means to make sure that you don't breach the rules around marketing. And as I say, you can see this as an opportunity to refresh your data, perhaps, and of course you need to record and your approach and your findings. So if you have a documented approach, be that a process that you then go and follow, that will stand you in good stead if should somebody come and complain and you get investigated or ask some questions by the Information Commissioner about your compliance. At least you can demonstrate you've put some thought to it, rather than just put your head in the ground and hoped it would go away or not happen to you. And actually, on that last point, it's worth just reiterating that data protection now, and with the GDPR and the privacy rules, they all apply to everybody. It's not the big businesses, it's not the global enterprises. It does apply to them, but it also applies to everybody. If you're dealing with personal data, it doesn't matter whether you're a one-man band or a multi-billion dollar global business. If you're processing data relating to EU citizens, this applies. Probably the significant challenge within the data protection area, and this is my last slide on data protection, is really the preparation of getting yourself ready and compliant by 25th of May next year. Now, that doesn't mean that on 25th of May 2018 there's a big switch and all of a sudden there's data police hanging around every corner trying to catch you out. But that's a target where the law becomes the law, and you need to aim for that as a way of being prepared. And in fact, there's a lot of stats out there at the moment, people saying that the majority of businesses aren't going to be prepared even if they start now. So even if it's a quick think about where you are with your business and your data initially, then that might give you some indication about how you want to move forward. But essentially, you need to get things up and running and going. You need to understand about the data protection rules and what they mean for your business. Depending on the size of your business, you need to make sure they understand how it's going to impact the business, and make sure that somebody is there to set up a working team across your business to actually deliver that compliance. You need to audit your data and your systems and your processes and your policies, perhaps produce a register of all of those so that you know what exactly you're dealing with. You then got to look at that data and those processes and those policies and procedures and make sure that you can understand what it is that needs to change. You then need to set up in place a project which you then deliver on a project plan to meet compliance. And then the final step, and for a lot of businesses this is usually forgotten, is actually compliance isn't a one-time checkbox exercise. It's something that's ongoing. So be that training staff, making sure everybody's up to date, making sure your policies are still relevant, making sure you're keeping on top of the changes. And as I say, we can see a lot of changes happening over the next year, maybe 2 years, maybe even longer, with different declarations as to interpretation of the law, changes with Brexit and all those kind of things. So the managed cycle is quite a significant one to think about. So that's some GDPR challenges, that data protection challenges. I'm going to move now on to privacy. So we've got in the UK the Privacy and Electronic Communication Regulations, which implement the EU's Privacy Directive, which controls rules around electronic marketing, and it also sets out some rules about business-to-business data and how you can market to those. So it's worth looking at that, which goes back to the point I was saying about making sure your business data isn't actually personal data and how that might impact it. But the privacy rules are particularly famous for introducing controls around cookies and requiring cookie statements on websites. But if GDPR challenges weren't enough, there's a new set of e-privacy regulations currently in draft, going through all EU regulation has to go through various checkpoints, and it's currently the e-privacy regulations are going through those. It has to be signed up by Council, Parliament and various other EU bodies. On the face of it, what we've seen so far, there was a leaked copy before the at the end of last year, which implied that business-to-business marketing would have the same rules as personal data marketing. So there was quite a lot of interest in what that might mean. Those rules have now changed, and it's looking in the current draft as though it will be very similar to the current regime we've got now, but it will need to be implemented in member state law. So it's not something that's dictated by, so corporate data isn't something that's going to be dictated by the privacy regulations. It will be down to member states. Of course, where that leaves us in the UK, with the fact that we've got a data protection bill on the table, we've got we're leaving Europe and various other bits and pieces, it's going to be an interesting time even in this particular area. So in an electronic communication sense, I'm focusing here on privacy electronic communication regulations, and the fact that actually probably that's not going to change much with the new e-privacy regulations, but you never know because there's still a debating period to be had. And actually something I should have said when I was talking about e-privacy regulations is the plan is, from a Europe point of view, that they come into force at the same time as GDPR. So as well as GDPR coming on the 25th of May 2018, new e-privacy regulations will also sweep across the whole of Europe, member states as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on. So from a privacy electronic communication regulation perspective, which is the rules as implemented today and are currently running in parallel with data protection, they basically control how you do telephone marketing, email marketing, SMS marketing. And as I say, there's some e-privacy challenges. Sorry, the e-privacy changes is another challenge to add to the pot with regards to what might be changing. So the telephone marketing rules are very much about if you have a load of data or telephone numbers that you want to use for marketing purposes, then it controls the regime and the mechanisms by which you can do that. So it's things like cleaning your list against telephone preference service. In the email marketing sense, it controls and complements data protection around consent, as well as defining business-to-business marketing and how that works, which is essentially, provided it's business data and not personal data, you can market provided you deliver the marketing with an opt-out option, and you abide by the decision to opt out if somebody has clicked on that link or ask you to remove their data. And it controls some other rules around if you are marketing to a personalized email within a business, that you are only marketing stuff that's relevant to that person's role within the business, rather than just marketing them with anything. And very in the same vein, there's controls and it manages how you are allowed to use SMS text marketing as well. So some serious ramifications in electronic marketing or digital marketing impacted on by PECR as it is now. And as I say, I can't say this enough, the privacy regulations that are coming in could impact the way that some of this works. The thing where it is actually likely to make a change, the new e-privacy reg changes, is in cookie control, because of all the confusion as to what you should and shouldn't have on your website and what you can and can't do with cookies and how they're managed, and whether you should not allow somebody to use a website if you must use cookies and all these kind of things. They're actually looking to change the rules around how cookies are implemented. But essentially, the Privacy and Electronic Communication regulations, which implement the current EU Privacy Directive, is there to define how automated mechanisms like cookies work, and through various bits of guidance and best practice with the Information Commissioner, who also is responsible for Privacy and Electronic Communication regulation compliance. We have some guidance around what a cookie notice should look like on your website and what it actually should mean. Where we're likely to head with the new e-privacy regulations is very much essentially where we are at in the UK, which is a very much browser-driven compliance, which means that the browsers that are available in the UK will need to, or across Europe I should say, will need to be easily configured and modified to determine your cookie controls that you want to implement as a user. So rather than baffling people by sending cookie notices on their websites, it will be more about, a cookie notice will be, we use cookies, and you can use your browser settings to change whether you want to carry on using cookies with our site. Of course, the problem with that currently is if you turn cookies off, it turns it off for everybody, not just the site that you're currently visiting. So it will be interesting to see how that might change going forward. And also, the privacy regulations also control things like privacy policies and how you and sets out definitions there of how you use data and the privacy of using websites. So that's another challenge, your privacy challenges. And then the final batch is really around data security and cyber security. So I'll quickly whip through these because time is getting on. So from a data security point of view, any business needs to think about how it's securing its website, how it's using online platforms, particularly things like cloud services, and whether they're secure for their business, and even security risks from using social media. So I'm going to quickly touch on those. Probably the biggest website security risk is really from the content management system and any vulnerabilities. It is, after all, just software which has been written by humans. And in any security environment, humans are the weakest link. If you use WordPress, you're more likely to hear about security issues, because purely on the basis that something like 25% of websites on the internet are built on WordPress, which makes it very popular, and the popularity brings with it a target for seeking out vulnerabilities. And this was very well demonstrated very well at the beginning of this year when they released a new version which had a security hole in it that enabled people to change content from outside the website. So people were spotting that their posts were being changed. And whilst WordPress had fixed that vulnerability in a number of security releases, if your WordPress platform doesn't do security updates automatically, then your site wouldn't have been patched, and there were actually hackers out there looking for out-of-date versions of WordPress that they could then make use of. So you need to keep your data, your website software up to date always. So it doesn't matter whether you're using something like WordPress or Joomla or some bespoke system. Just make sure that you understand how you keep your website software up to date, or indeed, if somebody says that they do it for you, that they look after your website, that this is one of the things that they look after for you. You've also got brute force attacks. People are they find ways to trying to log into your website and take over your website, and you might think, well, why would they do that to me? Well, if they can take over your website, then they can put up illegal content, and they can use it for attacking other sites or setting up malware so that people get infected when they visit your site. This all has impact on your performance online. Google will notice this and flag you, and you'll be black flagged, and your SEO rankings will drop, and there'll be various issues. And browsers these days will actually flag it up to the user, so they probably won't even visit your site. So if you've not got proper security on your website, so somebody could easily hack in because you've got a silly login and password, then you're at risk of being hacked. And brute force basically is a term that is used to refer to constant automated pushing of login and passwords and trying to find a weakness. So they use basically a database of words which they push against logins and hope that one of them is being used. Again, there are security plugins and options for various platforms. WordPress has a number that enable you to sort of double the security, to maybe use two-factor authentication, to use a mobile phone with a code to help log in as well. So if somebody does guess your login and password, they've at least going to have your mobile device or some other device to hand to be able to carry on and get in. And as I said, if your website gets compromised and infected with malware or other issues, then you've got potential SEO impact on your website and your business. Cloud security, probably the most common thing that people say to me is, my data's safe because I stick it in Dropbox or a similar kind of service. Well, just because Dropbox or any other cloud provider says that their system is secure, that's only half of the story. You need to make sure your access to it is also secure. So if you've got, so in a Dropbox's scenario, you have web access, which you might have auto-saved on your computer, the password. You've got app access through your mobile phone. If that's not got proper security on it, then you're just not introducing enough steps to try and put somebody off trying to get in, which is why things like two-factor authentication, and apologies, I've just spotted that I've missed a H in authentication on that slide. That's why they are useful, because again, in the same thing as I was saying earlier, websites, if people get access to your data, access to your login and password, they would need another device to be able to complete the login, so they won't have proper access. And that is definitely an issue with typical cloud-based services that are quite popular, that if you have multiple access points, be it your desktop computer, your laptop, your mobile device, or if you've got employees that have access to it because it's a shared platform as well, then these are security things you need to think about. And also the other thing is, if you're not using well-known providers, then you need to be sure that you can actually trust these people. And so the guy who says he's got a server he can give you some space on in the corner of his office or his bedroom, then you might want to question whether they take security properly and seriously, and you need to consider what you're doing. And security is a principle of data protection, and it still is a principle with the general data protection regulation. So not only could you run the risk of sort of industrial espionage style loss of data, but you could equally find yourself at the end of an information commissioner investigation because you've not got adequate security in place. And then social media, you've got other things to think about, as well as using it as a tool to promote your business. You need to think about, well, who's using it within your business? Are they saying the things that you want them to say? But actually, are they using it safely? You know, do they understand that some obscure link that somebody might have shared might take them to a website which has got a malware infection, and then you infect your business network? People might try and take over your social media to use it to send out sort of nefarious content, and a sort of almost a tongue-in-cheek, because I think that, I'm not sure how often this is likely to happen, but you know, if somebody's trying to cut and paste data from a spreadsheet of personal data and accidentally cuts it and pastes it into their Facebook profile, then you've got a data breach in that as well. But these are all things that you need to make sure you're covering, and having a policy and a process, and just making your staff fully aware what it is that they're doing, or how to manage social media in an effective way, not just as a tool to help promote your business, but also do it safely, is probably a good way forward. And on the cybersecurity aspect, it's really about your systems and your employees. As I said, I don't get involved in the technical side of things, so I don't help you set up your virus checker or how to remove a malware, and certainly in the recent ransomware scares, I wouldn't be the right person to speak to try and recover from that. But what I can do is I can work with your employees and work within your organization or with your clients to understand what are the risks that they face and how can they make sure that they minimize those risks. And in the same way, you might consider how you train your staff to understand data protection, so that everybody takes responsibility for data protection. Everyone needs to take responsibility for cybersecurity within your organization, and the easiest way of doing that is keeping them up to date with the changes and the tactics that people are using, and the terms that reflect a constantly evolving and changing environment, and some of the things to think about when you're talking to your employees or having a training session. You know, I've put on there things like typical things of phishing, which is somebody sends you an email trying to get you to hand over login credentials because it looks like it's you know, an Amazon email, or one of your vendors. You might get an email that looks like it's come from Dropbox, if that's what you choose to store your data, that might fall into the trap of clicking on some links, and before you know it, you've handed over your login credentials. CEO fraud is a very common one, particularly with certain types of businesses. Lawyers who deal with conveyancing and property and that kind of law for selling properties is a prime target for that, as they are with phishing, because they transfer large amounts of money usually at the end of the week. So if they look like they're getting an email from one of their vendors telling them to change their mind about where they're transferring the money, then they have to make sure they've got processes in place to be sure that really is the vendor or the other solicitor that's actually making that request. And the term CEO fraud is the typical scenario is a person quite junior within an organization, maybe a junior accounts assistant, gets an email that looks like it's come from the chief executive, somebody who they probably wouldn't question their authority, saying, you know that we've got the scaffolding outside doing some renovation, or we've got the builders in, or we're doing a a big business deal and we need to transfer some money to this account. It looks like it's come from the chief exec, but actually it's a fraudster trying to catch them out. And because they pick on a junior person and pretend to be a senior person, there's less chance, as I say, of people being questioned. And it's about not necessarily the fear factor of questioning this chief exec whether he really did send that email or whether she did put in that request. It's about understanding that you just need to check and carry out some checks and balances. And there's some pretty serious pieces of money to be had when these kind of things happen. And like I said, in scenarios like lawyers dealing with property transfers and transactions, there's an obvious risk there, but any business is at risk if they have a structure that enables them to somebody to pretend to be somebody that they're not. And in fact, I've heard of situations where the fraudsters basically work out by sending emails to the chief executive to get his or her style of language and how they write emails and things like that as a way to help manipulate the scenario. And then everybody knows about ransomware now, thanks to the WannaCry ransomware and the impact it had on the NHS in the UK. This is where you basically have your system locked down and encrypted, and then you get a ransom telling you that you can have your data back if you pay up. So the problem there is, do you pay up? Can you afford to pay up? If you don't pay up, they might delete the data. But even if you do pay up, there's a good chance that you won't get the data back anyway, because they might hold you for further ransom. So the answer is twofold: technical solutions, which your IT guys can put in place for you, and education and awareness. Train your staff to understand the risks, understand how they can just be sure to double check that they're doing the right thing, and to spot the issues, and keep up to date, and make sure that you're fully aware of and conversant with what those issues are. So I hope that wasn't too scary, but there's quite a lot of challenges ahead, particularly in some of the changes to the law that are coming over the next year or so. And as I said, the complications of Brexit and various other things that are going on in the UK at the moment. But ultimately, if you want to manage your compliance, it's about understanding what the risks are, understanding how they impact your business or your services or your systems. Make sure you've got policies and processes and an approach in place, that you train your staff if that's relevant, that everybody knows within the business what their responsibilities are, and that you keep up to date. As I said, I think with all of these things, it's not a one-time tick box exercise. It's about managing ongoing compliance, and that might be training your staff, not necessarily having to carry out a data protection audit every 5 minutes. But you might also, in the data protection context, you might want to look at how often you train your staff, how often do you review your policies, how do you make sure that you're up to date with the latest views and guidance, and how often do you refresh your data and make sure that it's compliant, and similarly with privacy and marketing. So where does that leave that for you? Well, as I said, I think for any business, there's a lot of opportunity here to get it right. It's just a case of investing the time, and in some cases the money to get that in place. You might want to run workshops, deliver training, carry out audits, have an ongoing management, and you might do that internally, or you might outsource that. And really, that's I just very briefly want to talk about the Digital Compliance Hub, because that's one of the things that the Digital Compliance Hub can do. And as a consultant, I have the Hub, which is an online information service which looks at all of these areas with a view to providing help and access, but also it provides access to support lines, so that you can, if you've got a question or a query as part of your subscription, it's a monthly subscription service, and you can have access to help and support when you need it. And then the other side is the consultancy angle. So if you need help within your business that goes a bit beyond doing it yourself, which is essentially what the Digital Compliance Hub is about, then I can offer you services in that area. Now, on the Digital Compliance Hub, as I said, it's a monthly subscription service, but if you use the code there that's highlighted, Hub free month with hyphens in between, you can use it for a month for free. And in fact, if you sign up before the end of June, you'll get a 40% discount as well off a subscription. So have a look, and even if you're not sure about signing up, then drop me an email on demo@digitalcompliancehub.co.uk, and we can sort out a quick demonstration. I can show you what it is. In fact, what I'll do very quickly is just do you a very quick show of what I'm talking about. Hopefully you can see that. So this is the Digital Compliance Hub. Pricing information is in the pricing tab at the top. But essentially, I cover data protection, privacy, security, and there's help and support and other services as well as training and workshops. If we just quickly look at the data protection area as an example, there's lots of information here. So there's some stuff about marketing consent, which is sort of sets out an overview of where things are at the moment, the applicable law, any particular tools that I've got available, downloads, training that I'm running, those kind of things. But what might be useful, particularly if you're thinking about how you approach data protection audits, for example, is there's a data protection audit plan which can take you through those 5 steps I mentioned before. And there's various tools that you can download within that. So if if you're not sure what to say to the board as to get them to buy into the concept of needing to carry out an audit, there's a white label document you can use as a starting point. There's presentation slides you can use. There's a spreadsheet even that you can use for your register of data and policies and systems. So and the subscription there gives you access to this data. It also gives you gives you access to help and support, which is through email or limited telephone support. And I offer other services as well around things like if you've written a policy, you just want it to be sort of double checked for compliance and make sure that you've not missed anything, then that's all included in a subscription as well. So that's the Digital Compliance Hub. If I can get us back by exiting full screen mode, switching this back to PowerPoint. So have a look at the Digital Compliance Hub. As I say, you've got a free month coupon there that'll give you a free month, or I'm more than happy to take you through it and talk about it a bit more. And if you need specific help, then I can certainly talk to you about that. So that's all that I was going to cover today. Let me have a look and see if anybody's asked any questions. No, it's all quiet on the question front. If you've got a question now, feel free to quickly type that in the questions panel in the control panel. If nobody pops up with any questions, then I'll leave it at that and let you get on with your day. But if you think of anything, then let me know. Thank you, Helen, for your thank you. If there's anything that you think of that you wish you'd asked in that question section, then just ping me an email, and if it's something I can help you with, I will. Okay, nothing's coming through. It's 5 to 1 or thereabouts, so let's leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully happy to talk to you if there's anything that springs to mind that you wish you'd asked. Thanks, and thanks, Natasha. I just got your thank you as well. Thank you very much.